This is Bizarre Dimensions with Russ and John. And now we are talking paranormal.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Bizarre Dimensions with Wednesbury Paranormal. And this week's edition is for our Wiccan friends out there, and we've called it The Wicca Man.
Perfect.
Of all the religions in our multicultural Britain today, being such a diverse country, there is only one we can actually call British. Modern pagan witchcraft, or Wicca as it is known today, is one of the fastest growing religions of the 20th century. Its followers calling themselves witches who worship the god of the earth, believing they have the power to cast spells. Though Wicca looks like it originated in an ancient medieval folk religion, it was actually developed in the 1940s. It was developed by a grey-haired and grey-bearded middle-aged nudist in the New Forest, and his name was Gerald Gardner. Gerald was born in 1884 to a wealthy upper-middle-class family in England, and as an unwanted child, he grew up and was raised by his nanny. She took him to the Mediterranean as he suffered badly with his asthma, hoping the warmer climates would help. Gerald received no formal education at all and taught himself to read and write. In the year 1900, Gardner's nanny married a tea plantation owner in Ceylon, and Gardner was allowed to live with them until eventually owning a plantation on his own. Then, in 1911, he left Ceylon to go to Borneo, and then later Singapore, returning to England in 1927 to visit his father. While in England, Gardner became interested in spiritualist churches and seances. Gerald then had a whirlwind romance and married a relative of his sister-in-law and took her back to Malaya. Then in 1935, Gardner inherited £3,000, which then allowed him to retire early and then travel to Palestine, Turkey, Greece, Hungary and Germany on his way back to England. There, the cold weather again began to affect his health, and doctors recommended nudism to increase his exposure to the summer sun. However, the winter proved too much of a problem for him, so he and his wife moved to Cyprus, where they remained until the beginning of World War II. He brought his wife back home to England again for fear of the bombing raids taking place. They moved to the small village of Highcliffe, which was on the south coast. The village at that time was a hotspot for naturists, and being a great fan of taking off his clothes, he felt perfectly at home. However, Gerald soon felt dissatisfied and wanted something a little more unusual. In 1939, he joined the Rosicrucian Order Fraternal in nearby Somerford and found a group of friends who called themselves the Wicca. Wicca being the Old English word for witch. Later, in 1939, he was initiated into their coven in the New Forest. From then, he dedicated his life to this craft. He began to take part in rituals in the New Forest with his coven. There is, of course, a long history of witches or cunning folk going back to the medieval history, who would cast spells to bring people good luck or health. But Gerald wanted to use these spells in a way that would not only change your health, but also change the world. As an example, Gerald was a member of the Home Guard in the Second World War and decided he could use his magic against the Germans. They were at this time in France. Gerald took his coven to the New Forest, where a great circle had been erected. It is said the coven created a large cone of power, the largest ever attempted. The cone being not a physical object, but of a mindful thought. He believed this would help demonstrate the real power of Wiccan magic. The cone was sent mindfully to the German High Command and to Adolf Hitler himself. It said, "You cannot cross the sea. You cannot cross the sea. You cannot come." Of course, history tells us he didn't. While attending the coven, Gerald still travelled to London to enlist new members. He became friends with Ross Nichols, who founded the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, where Gardner also joined, attending its annual midsummer rituals at Stonehenge. Then, in 1947, Gardner was introduced to a man known as the Beast, a neo-pagan whose religion, the Lima, had earned him the name the wickedest man in the world. He was Aleister Crowley. Crowley initiated Gardner into the 7th degree of the Ordo Templis Orientis, granting him permission to perform initiations.
Perfect.
Crowley was never far from controversy, with his dark take on the occult. He and Gerald became close friends, and with Aleister getting old and nearing the end of his life, Crowley wanted Gardner to take over Thelema. However, Gardner wished to use Crowley's works for a more positive side of the occult, after being inspired by Sherlock Holmes author Arthur Conan Doyle while studying spiritualism. After Crowley's death, Gardner wrote a book of fiction he called High Magic's Aid in 1949, which it has been alleged was written by Crowley himself. This was to be the first known published accounts of Wiccan magic. This book was to spread the first seeds of Wiccan magic worldwide. If indeed the book was not written by Crowley, it at least borrowed a lot of his teachings and works, as well as from English folklore witchcraft, using many symbols, spells and rituals that Crowley wrote and taught. Gardner also used many symbols now recognised as Wicca but originated elsewhere, such as the easily recognised pentagram, which was taken from the symbol adopted from ancient times by the Freemasons. The book was the original guide to spells of Wicca and its rituals. manifesto of the new religion, which Gardner didn't want to die with him. He also wrote and compiled a scrapbook known as Ye Book of Ye Art Magical,
Perfect.
which he used to formulate his rituals, which later became known as the Gardner Transition. The scrapbook is now held in a secure vault on the Costa del Sol, now belonging to John Bellum Payne, the now senior priest of Wicca, and owner of many of Gardner's artefacts. The scrapbook is said to be worth over £1 million and known as the Wiccan's Holy Grail, the most valuable religious document of the 20th century, the foundation text and the closest thing there is to a Wiccan Bible. In 1951, Gerald and his wife moved to the Isle of Man, where he ran the Museum of Magic and Witchcraft, still travelling to London to recruit to his Bricket Wood coven. In 1954, Gardner published his book, Witchcraft Today, his essential guide to Wicca. He also wrote many articles for the papers, wishing to bring his Wicca religion to the masses. He then appeared on the Panorama BBC TV programme, reaching millions of viewers. The programme was well received by over 12 million people, and Gardner soon received hundreds of letters from people wanting to become a witch. Gerald had found his audience. He had become Britain's first modern witch celebrity. Wicca was now on the rise.
Perfect.
Today, Wicca is far from its roots in the New Forest, with it now being one of the top 10 religions in the United Kingdom census results. Following the death of his wife, he became unwell himself, and so decided to visit his friend, poet Peter Graves, in Mallorca. While travelling home to England aboard a ship, Gardner suffered a fatal heart attack between Lebanon and England. He was then buried in Tunisia. Gardner's memory lives on as the founder of the Gardner tradition and one of the most successful pioneers of the modern witchcraft religion, which was later called Wicca. His grimoire, the Book of Shadows, has inspired many modern witches worldwide to write their own rituals and spells and to form their own covens, as well as to practice their own solitary witchcraft. Wicca has now become a global faith and grows by the day. Gardner was known as Sire, his old craft name. He was the grand old man of witchcraft, and however we feel about its origins or the man himself, Wiccans owe him a great deal for standing up and bringing Wicca and witchcraft to the masses. Without this retired, grey-haired, grey-bearded older nudist gentleman, the witches out there today would not exist. Thanks to him, his beliefs continue in the global religious craft, growing forever and enlightening generations young and old. Wicca is the only religion Britain has ever given to the world. We hope you have enjoyed today's Bizarre Dimensions. From Wednesday Paranormal, thank you.